Hey, good morning, everybody. Captain Chris Holzer, and I'm coming to you from here in Mobile, Alabama at the Coast Guard's Aviation Training Center. And we've got Commander Retired Lonnie Mixon, who is one of our greatest Coast Guard aviation heroes, here today with an interview with Lieutenant Commander Jess Wright and myself. So, Lonnie, we are absolute admirers of everything that you and your generation of pilots have done for the Coast Guard. Before we get into talking to you, I just want to thank all the folks here that made this possible. We've got Gary Gamble here on behalf of the TAROs, the Coast Guard Aviation Association. Thank you for your undying support of Coast Guard Aviation. Chuck and Phil are in-house movie producers. That's not your official title, but you guys just pitch in everywhere and make things like this happen. Thank you guys very much. Jess Wright, you coordinated this whole event. Thank you. One of our pillars here at ATC is safeguarding the culture of Coast Guard aviation. And Jess, you really honored that today by doing that, so I appreciate it. And then for our distinguished cadre of pilots here, we've got pilots from all three of the here in Mobile platforms, our HC-144, the H-65s, and the H-60s. These were the lucky 12 that won the pool to come and interact with you, get to ask some questions. So, so that's why there's so many smiles across from you today, Lonnie. So. With that, everybody knows about your exploits in Vietnam. They're legendary. In fact, you just type in Lonnie Mixon into a Google search bar and up comes 10, 15 articles about what you did when you were attached to the Air Force doing combat search and rescue. But there's more history before that, and I'd love to spend some time talking about that. You're actually from Mobile here, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm. Grew up in Mobile. Went to McGill Institute.
Okay. Is that McGill-Tulin now?
It is McGill-Tulin now,
okay.
right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great. So I think we have a lot of our Coast Guard kids go to McGill-Tulin if they're looking for a Catholic school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What was Mobile like back in that time?
Oh, small, really small. As a matter of fact, McGill at that time was downtown on Government Street, directly across from the Admiral Sims Hotel.
Okay.
It was an old building down there, and I think we had 60 in my graduating class. 1951, but much smaller now, much smaller. Matter of fact, I'm not even sure Bates Field existed in those days.
I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And did you know of this area here, because ATC didn't come into being until 1966?
That's right.
So your graduation in 1951, a full 15 years before ATC even existed.
Mm-hmm. This was all wild country out here.
Wow.
Wild country.
And now you look
Matter
at
of fact, we
it
didn't have any interstates. No 60, I-65, I-10.
Wow. No. And did you come from a big family?
No, I was an only child, spoiled brat.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
Mr. Mixon, so how'd you get in the Coast Guard?
Well, after I got out of high school, I was going to Spring Hill College. And a lot of friends of mine had already gone into the military, various places. So I just wasn't fit for college at 18, so I decided, well, with Korea and everything going on, I said, well, I think I'll go ahead and join the military. And I had become familiar with the Coast Guard. As a matter of fact, a cadet from the academy came down when I was a senior at McGill and gave us a spiel about the Coast Guard, and was quite interesting. And back when I was a kid during World War II, comic books, there was Don Winslow. There was a comic books, and he was Don Winslow on the Coast Guard. So anyway, when it was time for me to decide, I decided, well, I'll try the Coast Guard. And then had to go to New Orleans, had to catch a train to go to New Orleans to join the Coast Guard then.
Wow. And now, and you didn't come into the Coast Guard and directly start doing aviation
Oh,
things, right?
no. I was enlisted for seven years. Then after going to OCS, I had a deck officer for a year in Morehead City, North Carolina, and then into flight training. Yeah.
Okay. So if you had to think about some of the neat experiences before you got introduced to flight, whether it be Ocean Station or whatever have you, what do you think is the neatest non-aviation experience you've had?
Well, I'll tell you one little story about Ocean Station. That's where the 255, it was the Pontchartrain, would go halfway between Hawaii and the United States, and we would act as a weather station and a nav aid for commercial airplanes. Back then, that was again before jets. So we would track the airplanes on radar, give them wind direction and things like that. So one day the skipper decided, well, let's have swim drill, let everybody go swimming. So they put one of the lifeboats over the side with some ropes hanging from it, lines, I'm sorry, not ropes, hanging from it. And so a bunch of us jumped
Seven
in.
Cuttermen just like started screaming.
Right. So yeah, we jumped in and swimming, and of course they had a rifleman up on the ship in case of sharks, things like that. But looked up, and all of a sudden the ship is sort of just drifting away. And lo and behold, they didn't have the engines online. So here we're all swimming out in the middle of the Pacific, trying to hang on to the lifeboat. So that was the thing to remember, I thought. Oh, one other thing I have to tell you about this. One of the trips out there, the poor supply officer, brand new ensign, we got out to see we didn't have any toilet paper. Can you imagine that, being out there on a 2-month cruise without toilet paper? They wound up having to send an airplane out and drop toilets. We used all the napkins and everything else. But I mean, that was the old guard. Something different.
No
Of course,
toilet
I don't
paper.
think that ensign
Lonnie, none
made it
of
very high.
that was in the
there wasn't
in the
in
stuff
there.
that I read
No.
about. That's great. Oh man. So how did you make the leap from Ocean Station, being a sonarman in the Coast Guard, to becoming an officer and then Coast Guard aviation?
Well, let's see. I was on the list for chief, for sonarman, but there were only 7 billets for chief sonarman back in those days, and I was number 4 on the list to make chief, but had to wait for 4 people to retire before any billet opened up. So that meant maybe before I had my 20 in, I might make chief.
Right.
So I tried things. I was going to change rate to bosun mate, things like that. Took the officer qualification test. There was an avenue to go to warrant officer. I was working on that. And I took applied for OCS. I did the college equivalency test. And finally got selected for OCS, yeah.
Okay. And then from there, how about into aviation?
Well, let's see, I was in Morehead City, North Carolina on the ship, and we were out one day, actually pretty bad weather sometime off of Cape Hatteras up there. And we were out on a search, and one of the Coast Guard fixed wings were out flying, and it was just about night, and he called in and said, Coast Guard cutter Cholula, call the air station and tell them we'll be landing in about 30, 45 minutes. I said, damn, if we left station right now, it'd be tomorrow afternoon. I was about seasick and, on and on. I said, that's the way to go. 30 minutes, you'll be back at home. So when we got back in, I applied for flight training and was accepted.
Wow.
And where was that flight training? Was it in Pensacola?
Well, I went to Pensacola,
Okay.
then to Milton, and then to Corpus Christi.
And then when'd you start flying in the Coast Guard?
I started flying the Albatross up in Brooklyn. Flew that for a year and a half, and just made aircraft commander. And then the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, and they were asking for people down in Miami. Everyone was going to Miami because of all the patrols and so forth. So I was transferred to Miami, flying the Albatross, and that was beautiful. You talk about beautiful.
Yeah.
We operated strictly off the water in Dinner Key.
Right.
Over the side, put the wheels down, up the ramp, and that's it. And then I was there for a while, and then I went to helicopter training from there. Back to Pensacola, to Ellison Field. This was matter of fact, I was at Ellison Field when President Kennedy was shot, so that year, that was 63. And then 64 and 65, flying the helicopters and fixed wing at the same time in Miami. That was exciting. That was exciting. In those days, as a helicopter pilot, we didn't have co-pilot. We were flying the H-52. We didn't have co-pilots. We didn't have enough pilots. So we'd go at night, whatever it was, just one pilot and one crewman. So that you come up on some tough situations when you're like that, trying to operate the hoist. And so if I remember one night, I'm going off tangent here, but there was a chief corpsman, was the SARA crewman. Him and me, we were it. We went out, we'd gotten a call, there was a guy had a bad back, and he was on a sailboat. So we went out on scene, and the guy couldn't get up out of the hatch. So what were we going to do? So the chief got in the water, took the Stokes litter, swam over to the sailboat, got aboard, went below, got the guy up, got him in the Stokes litter, floated him back to the helicopter, got him back inside, and we took off. That's the kind of things we used to do for whatever had to be done at the time, yeah.
Wow.
And you said that was all at night?
Yeah, this was nice.
Man.
That's scary. And it just occurred to me, so when you first started flying HU-16s, the Albatross, and then transitioned into helicopters, they were all still boat hull aircraft.
Yeah.
From
Well,
airplane
I
to
flew the
helicopter.
HO4S for a couple of months,
Okay.
and then we transitioned into the H-52.
Right.
And man, what a beautiful thing that transition that was.
Wow.
Amphibious and,
So to go from HOS-4s to H-52, still a single-engine helicopter.
Oh, yeah.
And then when we get to the H-3, that's got to be like the big power
It
jump.
is. That's right, exactly.
Oh, that's
yeah.
cool. And so I'm putting the dates together, 62, fixed wing, Miami, Cuban Missile Crisis. So what was your day-to-day during the actual Cuban Missile Crisis?
Well, we would have patrols out of there. Like I said, we had pilots from every unit had to augment the number of pilots because we were flying, maybe 3 patrols a day. They'd go all the way down to Cuba, fly around all the Bahamas, looking for refugees, things like that. And then all of the Russian ships that were coming into Cuba, we would have to take, photographs of them and send them back in that night. So we'd maybe go on a 6-hour flight during the day in the GOAT, and then that night may have be the ready pilot with the helicopter.
Wow.
So that was exciting flying.
So you flew 6 hours, and then you got in the helicopter at night and then flew again?
Yeah. This was before they didn't have any restrictions. Matter of fact, in 1965, that's when they first came out, putting time limits on how much you could fly in a day and so forth. And we thought, we'll never survive this. It won't work. I remember, and we didn't have enough helicopter pilots. One night I was the duty, and back in those days, alligators were protected. And we got a call from the district that there were poachers out in the Everglades, and we had to send a helicopter out, look for poachers. Can you imagine at 500 feet flying over the Everglades, here's a poacher down here with a rifle, But we didn't. But now we had just gotten the rule that we have to have a co-pilot. So what we did, we got a fixed wing pilot to come sit in the co-pilot seat while we go fly at night like that.
Wow. We have a little bit tighter restrictions now on both.
Just a little.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm barely allowed to fly in the helicopter. It has to be with like a special kind of person like Jess. Oh, that's amazing. Now, so from there, was it Detroit? Was your next?
Yeah,
duty
as a matter of
station?
fact, that was good. Yeah, we opened up Detroit. The plank owner, that was fun. We opened it up sooner than we were supposed to. I guess the politicians got involved, and they wanted the air station up and running before they even started building a hangar. So we operated out of the end of a supply hangar from the Air Force up there. We had little petitions in there, had the CO's office, the XO's office. I was the operations officer. And then we had a little nose hangar down the way. We had 3 H-52s, had 10 pilots and I think 20 crewmen. And that was experience, and it was really, really good.
Wow. And you had one very notable rescue. 8 lives saved while in Detroit.
Oh,
right?
yeah, the Nordmere, right, yeah. That was,
Can you tell us about that?
yeah, this was in Detroit, and you won't believe, it's hard to believe too, but our communications was, we had a telephone and a teletype, and we had a facsimile machine for weather. And essentially that was our communications. We'd talk to the district on the landline, and on the teletype we'd follow the messages as all the messages from the district would go. Traverse City had been directed to send a helicopter rescue. There was a German motor vessel, Nordmere, that had gone aground up in Lake Huron, and it had been aground a few days, and all of a sudden the weather had gotten bad, and they had abandoned ship except for 8, the skipper, and 7 other people had stayed on board. And now they had lost power, and they didn't have any heat or anything, and they were asking to be evacuated. The Coast Guard cutter Mackinac was standing by to assist, but they told the Traverse City to go out and make the rescue. But the weather was so bad, Traverse City says we can't get airborne. It's snow. Of course, this was in November. You can imagine November in the Great Lakes if you're familiar with that at all. So I was sitting there watching the teletype, all this going on. And in Detroit, the weather is pretty good, 400 or 500 feet and, mild visibility. So I said, Skipper, maybe we ought to try it from this angle, going up rather than trying to come across. And he said, well, give the district a call, and if they authorize it, we can go. So I called the SAR office in the district, and they sent us a message back and said, yeah, launch if you want to. So Jack Ritticher and I took off, and going up the coastline, up the Lake Huron. And it was really, really low. We were 200 or 300 feet, ice snowing, and we weren't sure whether it was icing or not. We got about halfway up the way, and Jack said, man, I think we're taking on icing. He said, we ought to land. I said, no. I said, Jack, just look, we're not taking any more power. It's the same power. We're maintaining altitude, maintaining speed, so I don't think we're losing anything. So we kept going. We got up to Alpena, which is a little peninsula that sticks out there from Michigan. And that's where we were going to take off and do a search to go out to locate the Nordmeer where it was. So we took off there, and again, we were down again. Really, visibility is really, really bad and snowing. So I said, okay, Jack, we'll go out on a northeast heading of like 040, and we'll go out for 20 minutes. And if we don't see the ship by then, we'll start a ladder search coming back in. So we went out, and he timed us, and we got the end of 20 minutes. He said, time to turn. Excuse me. I said, Jack, let's just go 2 more minutes, and then we'll go back. Lo and behold, a minute later, we looked down, and we were directly over him. I mean, that was unbelievable, totally unbelievable. So we've got 8 guys down here. So we could only take 4 at a time. So we dropped a radio down to them, told them what we were going to do, hoisted 4, and so Jack said, well, why don't we take them into Alpena? There's a Wurtsmith Air Force Base. We can drop them off there and then come back and get the. I said, no, by then it'll be dark, and I'm not sure we can get back. So I called the Mackinac and said, what we want to do, I want to bring these 4 guys over, drop them down to your deck, and then we'll come back and get the other 4. So that's what we did. And of course, the Mackinac, the seas were so heavy that they could not get a boat. I mean, that's how bad the seas were. They couldn't get a boat over to the grounded ship. So we hoisted 4, took them over, lowered them down to the Mackinac. And the toughest part of the whole thing was lowering those guys down to the Mackinac because the ship was going up and down like this. And so they had one guy on the deck back there with the dead man stick. I guess you still have that for electricity. And
yes, sir.
So he did that. So we got all 8 of them off over to the Mackinac like that. And so then we left scene and was going into Wurtsmith to get fuel, head back to Detroit. And we went in, got fuel, got airborne, and was getting ready to head back. And the Mackinac called and says, within 10 minutes after we had left scene, the Nordmeer had broken athwartships, and everybody would have been lost. I mean, so it's just one of those fate type things. It's had we not gone that extra minute, had we stopped to check if we were taking on ice or not, we wouldn't have been there in time. And had we taken 4 of them into Wurtsmith, the other 4 would have been. I mean, it's just that's the way it is. You guys will run into things like that. You never know until you get there and see. That's one thing about the Coast Guard. Until you get on scene, that's when you have to start thinking, and that's when the pilot comes into doing his thing then. Because you can't sit there and pre-plan everything back before you go out. You have an idea, but once you get on scene, that's when you come into action. Wow. That's the difference, I think, between Coast Guard pilots than other pilots that I've seen.
Wow. Well,
That's pretty amazing.
And that carried through to today. I mean, that is something that we reinforce here at the schoolhouse and throughout the fleet is that on-scene initiative, and that belongs to the aircraft commander and his or her crew.
That's right.
So, well, that's amazing.
Sir, were there any other memorable moments up in Detroit? Because I know you had quite a few rescues up there.
Well, let's see. I had quite a few, really. made one, I can't remember the name of the island. That was down in Lake Erie. Well, I'll tell you what, one thing though. We used to do, I guess most stations still do, on Sunday, Saturday and Sunday evening, we used to do a shore patrol just to see if anyone was broken down before nightfall. I don't know whether they still do that, but everywhere back in the day, that's what we would do. And at Detroit, we would just open it up. Matter of fact, we didn't even have a hangar, as I said. And we flew down the Detroit River into the opening of Lake Erie and was turning around, getting ready to come back. And look way out there, it looked like a barrel of something floating out in Lake Erie. So I told my co-pilot, I said, let's just ride out there and see what that is. Lo and behold, we got out there. It's a boat that's overturned and two guys hanging on to it. They'd been there since the night before.
Wow.
You know, again, it sounds unbelievable, but those are the things that happen. Had we not been able to get them there, this was Sunday night. Whether they could have made it hanging on to the overturned boat or not, and when somebody found them, we don't know. But
that's cold water any time of year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, we are about halfway through our 40-minute window here, and there's water on your right side if you need any water.
Okay, good.
I would love to jump into your time on exchange with the Air Force. So if we kind of take ourselves back to 1967, and if I remember correctly, you and Jack Rich here are shipmates together in Detroit.
Yes.
Lance Egan is a third person.
Right.
And you raise your right hand to volunteer for something.
Yeah, we did. Actually, in the beginning of 1967, came out of headquarters asking for 3 helicopter pilots to be exchange pilots with the Air Force to fly rescue in Vietnam. And we knew that there was H-3, and ultimately the Coast Guard would get H-3. So that was sort of a thing that, made you want to go and do it, for one thing, to get to see the airplane. But the 3 of us were selected, Jack and I from Detroit and Lance Egan from Brooklyn. The 3 of us were selected, and we went through various schools, and then the RAG went to Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, learned how to fly the H-3, and then went to Destin, Florida to do air-to-air refueling. Like I said, that was exciting with an H-3 flying behind a C-130, and then it really got good when you had to do it at night. But anyway, and that was it. And then we went to Vietnam, the 3 of us there. And
wow.
So.
And I don't know if it's in the camera views, but this is actually Lonnie's helicopter behind us here. And you can see that fuel probe on the right side of the nose. So you can imagine trying to stick that in a drogue as it's coming off the back of a C-130 at night, pitching. That's one of the scariest things.
Sir, do you mind telling us kind of what the daily life was like when you were up there in Vietnam?
The what?
Your daily procedures up there?
Well, actually, we had about 50 pilots, I guess, and each day we would have as many as 2, 4, 6, 8 or 10, 12 crews out each day. So generally, you would fly 2 days, maybe 3 days, and then have a day off. Would have alert duty at Da Nang. You always had two aircraft. We call the primary, secondary helicopter. The primary would be the low bird, and the second high bird. Whoever was, as a matter of fact, I was a schedules officer in the squadron, and whoever was assigned low bird, they were the flight leader of that group for the day when you go out to see who was going to do the rescue or whatever, things like that. So we would have an alert crew at Da Nang. We'd have an alert crew at Quang Tri, which was the Marine base up near the DMZ. Then we'd have orbiting up off of North Korea, for people who were bombing up north. If they got hit, maybe they might make it to the ocean, to the South China Sea, and they were up there to pick them up there. So we would have quite a few people flying each day. Yeah.
Wow. And on the Aviation Association website, they chronicle a couple of your bigger rescues, and I know that you had dozens. But am I right that for at least a long time you held the highest altitude rescue?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this was on. The guy was out. He was on a mountaintop. It was. We went out. This was up north, and we went out to look at the thing. He was up, and he he couldn't move. He was injured. We weren't sure what, but we got out and it was 5,200 feet, and this was summertime. It's quite, density altitude. So we got there, and matter of fact, that day Lance Egan was the high bird. I was low bird. Went in and made a low pass over to look at the situation, and there were scrub trees and pinnacles and everything there, so we couldn't land. We knew we'd have to conduct a hoist. So we checked the temperature and the altitude, and the power available was not enough for our weight to hover, so we didn't have enough power to hover. So I called Lance, he was high bird, and asked him to confirm the figures, look in this, see what we had. He said, nope, you can't do it. You don't have enough power to hover. So what we did, they have drop tanks, and each one of them had 200 gallons of JP4. You drop both of those, that's 2,500 pounds that you lose weight right there. And then we had a rapid dump system. You turn one switch, and it just starts pumping everything over the side. It had a standpipe that would not allow you to dump below 45 minutes. So we dumped everything we had, and we did that. We still weighed too much for the power available. So I told Lance, I tell you what, I think maybe there should be maybe a little updraft coming up the side of the mountain. And I only weighed 140 pounds in, and everything was calibrated, the pilot's being 160. I said, so we can deduct 20 pounds here. So I said, let's just try it. And if we go in for a high approach, and if it looks like we're going to run out of power, I can dump it over and go down, stay in transitional lift, and go down the mountainside, because we should have a little breeze coming up. And we tried that, made a nice steep approach in, and lo and behold, yes, we got there about 15 feet, and it was holding. But I don't know now, your RPMs, the more you pull power, your RPMs go down, but you sit there and you touch and go, you pull more power, you're going to lose turns, and you go. So we were sitting right there, just touch and go, man. And so we lowered the penetrator down to the guy, and he just looked at it. Didn't know what to do. He was just in shock or something. So pulled it back up, and we're getting ready to lower to put the PJ on the ground. The PJ pararescuemen, they're the guys that you put on the ground. They are combat recovery experts. They are rescue experts. They're what I guess to the Air Force what the Green Berets might have been to the Army, but they're the jack of all trades. They're the guys. Stu Stanilan and his cohort was Doug McGill. They were the two of the main PJs that I remember. Anyway, we're getting ready to put the PJ on the ground, and so I told the crewman, said, okay, try one more time, lower it down to him and see if he may understand this time. And he did. So he got on it, and we pulled him up. So we didn't, again, sitting there just, milking it. And we were able to get out, and then we landed at an Army LZ, which was down in the valley for fuel. So we were pretty low on fuel, but that was one of the good rescues. Of course, unopposed, you always love them when they're unopposed. Right. I guess one of the other ones, shall I go on these telling stories? Or?
Lonnie, we are just going to sit here and listen, because this is unlike anything that we do day to day.
This was one, a pilot was down. He was in North Vietnam, and I had the duty at Da Nang. It's about an hour's flight from there up to the DMZ. But this afternoon, the pilot was down, and the Jollies had gone in to try to rescue him, and they had received lots of ground fire, heavy damage. He had to pull off. And then after what they do when that happens, they send jets in, and also SPADs, which are the Douglas Sky Raiders. They're a great airplane. They were always flying with the Jollies as escorts, and they would give ground support for us. So they went in and what they called sanitized the area, if you will. And another helicopter went in, and the same thing. He took heavy ground fire. Matter of fact, he wound up with an RPG in his fuel cell. Luckily, it didn't explode. Excuse me. So now they had dispatched us from Da Nang to go up as the backup crew for these people that had been there. So I got up there. It was probably late in the afternoon now, maybe 4 o'clock, something like that. And it had been maybe a half hour, 45 minutes. So they had been sanitizing the area all this time. And we got there and I dropped the fuel tanks. You always jettison the fuel tanks. Went in, made an approach, and we had radio contact, so we were able to home in on this location. But the canopy is, I guess the height of some of the trees, maybe 200 feet, and the canopy is so thick you can't see through them on the ground. So you have to go where you think the guy is and drop the penetrator down through the canopy down to the ground. And we did that, and we just started the penetrator to going down, and all of a sudden, well, we were just inundated with ground fire from everywhere, you know, caution lights going on and padding coming down. So we were able to get out, wound up with a hydraulic leak and, electrical failure. But the airplane was flying, so we climbed up to altitude, about 3,000 feet. So the A-1s went back in, jets, fast movers went in. So now it's getting dark and tracers are flying. It looks like a John Wayne movie with all the tracers and everything at night going in. So decided we'll try it one more time before it gets dark. So I went back in, and again, the same thing, established a hover and just inundated with ground fire. So we pulled out and made it down to Quang Tri, which was just across the DMZ. That was the Marine helicopter base. So we were told, stay there the night. Of course, the helicopter was non-flyable anymore, of course. That they would send us another helicopter next morning. So thanks. So anyway, we did. We stayed there with the Marines that night, and the next morning we got up, and we had another helicopter there, so, and a backup crew. So we were up and on scene about 8 o'clock, I guess. And of course, overnight, the B-52 has been dropping bombs, and you can't imagine when you drop those bombs how frightening it is, just the sound of them all around. That plus the jets and the A-1Es going in. So we got up there and they said, well, okay, we think it's safe now. Let's make another attempt. So dropped the fuel tanks, pumped gas out, and getting ready to go in. And the forward air controller said, no, I think I see some bad guys down here. Hold off, don't abort the attempt right now. So I sat there and orbited about 20 minutes, and they still making tests. I said, look, I'm dumped on my fuel. I got to go. Bingo. So I said, well, I'm going to go back to Quang Tri, get some more gas, and I'll be back in about 40 minutes. So I started back, and one of the A-1Es flew escort for me going back. And we were about halfway back to Quang Tri. He was maybe 100 yards or so off my starboard wing, and glanced over here, and all of a sudden he's on fire. And he just starts flying in front of us, going like he's going to crash. He lands about 2 miles ahead. He's on fire all the way. So we just followed him right down to see if he's going to parachute, jump out, or what. And when he hit the ground, he just exploded, just inundated, just like that, everything. So we flew right in, made one circle, no chance of survival whatsoever. So we left and went on back to Quang Tri, got fuel, headed back up to the rescue site. And now, while I was gone, Lance Egan had been sent up from Da Nang. He had gotten there. And so they had sent him in. So Lance went in to make an approach. So Lance went in to hover, right, he was down low, right at treetop level, put his PJ on the ground to find this guy. So he sat there in a hover for about 5 minutes while the PJ's on the ground looking for this guy, and he finally finds him. He has a broken back. PJ brings him over to the hoist. They get him on the hoist, and they start hoisting him up through the canopy, through the jungle. And just as they start to break through the canopy, he was inundated with ground fire. The first bullet that hit the airplane went right through the plexiglass, right between Lance and the co-pilot. And they were just smothered with fire. So Lance held his position until the crew, the PJ and thing, got almost up to the door, and then he was able to fly out. So it was a successful mission, but it's pretty hairy. That was one of the missions where actually we saved a pilot, but we lost a pilot. A lot were like that. So that was a sad one. Okay, I'll tell you the last one. June the 8th, June. It was Saturday. I had the duty at Da Nang, the standby duty. Got a call just in the evening that an Army Mohawk had been shot down. He and his crewmen were back in the jungle, and they had contact with him. They were okay. So this charged us as, okay, be on scene at first light in the morning to pick these guys up. So we did. We got up and was airborne at daylight, went out, found them, picked up the pilot, then went over and picked up the crewman. Got back to the base at Da Nang. Now it's probably 8:30 or so in the morning. Landed, got out of the airplane, and Jack Ritticher and Captain Dick Yeen were there, ready to get in our helicopter. They had another mission that was going on, and they needed our helicopter. So they had the fuel truck right there, refuel the airplane while they were getting in and we were getting out. Okay, I went in, made my report, went up to the officers club, had breakfast, went back to the quarters. About 30 minutes later, Lance happened to be the duty officer that day. He called me and said that Jack had crashed and there were no survivors. So I went back down to operations, and I questioned every pilot that had come in that had been there on scene. What had happened is Jack got to the scene where this pilot was down, had made an approach in, and again started taking heavy ground fire. And he abandoned the attempt, and after about 20 minutes of support ground fire, he went back in again. He went back in, established a hover, and the pilots around told him his starboard engine was on fire. So they said, well, there's a landing spot. It looks like it's clear enough that you might be able to land about 75 yards right straight ahead. So it looked like, this is the report from each pilot that was there, all of them verified the exact same thing, that it looked like that they were trying to make that landing spot. And but his engine's on fire as he's going up to get there. And then as he got to the landing area, he landed, the whole airplane exploded. Where there was another rocket had hit him or what, but the whole airplane exploded. The only thing left that was identifiable was the tail ramp. On the H-3s, they had a tail ramp, if you're familiar with it. But that was the only thing that was identifiable left. So that was a sad day there.
I think it was a little less than 40 years later that we finally had the remains
That's right.
come back in 2003.
It was, exactly.
Jack and his crew.
Mm-hmm. A little anecdote there. Of course, Jack Ritticher and I had flown together in Detroit. Captain Dickie Yeen from Mobile. Small world, I'm from Mobile. When I was between my junior and senior year at McGill, I was a counselor at Camp Cullen, which is a boys' summer camp over on Mobile Bay. I was a counselor there, and Dickie Yeen, 8, 9-year-old kid, was over there during that summer. And here we go, years later, thousands of miles away, the two of them, the two that I had known back here, got in the same helicopter that I had just gotten out of, and less than 2 hours later shot down and killed. That gives you an eerie feeling. It really does. So that was a thing. I think that's about it. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. One other thing. Oh, yeah. Here's some pictures of bullet holes, checking bullet holes.
We don't usually have to do this on pre-flights now.
No.
But
And here's a pic. Lance took a couple of pictures of that high altitude.
is this the 5,200 foot
Right.
hoist?
Lance had a little camera, and he took a photograph. So that'll show you the what it looks like, the terrain, the mountainous, and the trees and so forth. See, but anyway, one name you guys should not forget is John Mosley. John Mosley was Coast Guard Academy class 1954. He was a Coast Guard aviator. He got out of the Coast Guard and flew commercial. When he retired commercially, he decided that he was going to publish the story of Coast Guard aviation in Vietnam. And John spent endless hours, months documenting and verifying and inventory and interviews, and wrote and published Coast Guard aviation in Vietnam. So had John not done that, we would be a footnote to aviation in Vietnam. And so if you ever, and now once he finished that, he started working, excuse me, with the pterodactyls. He's written all sorts of articles, historical articles, for the pterodactyls now. The last thing, I guess, and when the three of us were selected, we felt pretty good. We thought, having been selected from all of our peers, all the other pilots that had volunteered, and here we were the elite. So, and we knew then that we had a dual mission, not only rescue, but we had to carry the banner of the Coast Guard. Probably just like you felt when you were with the Canadian Air Force. It makes you feel a little different.
Yes, sir.
And that's what we did. And of course, Jack was killed in action on June the 9th. Lance Egan, retired captain, he retired in 1990, 92. 1993, he died with complications with a chemical agent orange that probably he had contracted in Vietnam, but young man, only 53 years old. Because of that and remembrance of them, what I want to do, this is one of my prized possessions right here. This is a letter to the Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard. It's from the Department of the Air Force. Would you read that, Captain?
Yes, sir. To the Commandant, from the Commander of the Air Force Group. I rarely have the privilege or occasion to so sincerely praise the contributions and accomplishments of fellow members of the armed forces, as in the case of your Coast Guard officers who have served with the U.S. Air Force in Southeast Asia during the past year. The Coast Guard has been represented with honor and integrity of the highest degree during this history-making exchange program. Fellow comrades will never be forgotten, and we can proudly say that Lieutenant Jack Ritchier performed heroically in giving his life for the highest motive known to mankind. His untimely death was indeed a tragic loss for us all. Lieutenant Commander Lonnie L. Mixon and Lieutenant Lance Egan distinguished themselves, the Coast Guard, and the rescue concept. They, by their never-ending desire to professionally accomplish the mission, have set the standard for others to follow. Our personal regard for these officers is such that it is requested that this letter and appropriate attachments be permanently retained in their files. From General Holland.
So
that is amazing stuff, Lonnie. I think of you and Lieutenant Egan, and then Lieutenant Ritchier, kind of the forefathers of combat search and rescue for the Coast Guard in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable stuff. We have a couple minutes left, and I would love to finish out with your time here at ATC. Maybe get any advice from you. But are there any questions that we have from the pilots here? I don't know if we have any Facebook questions in. Chris.
Sir, how well did your Coast Guard skills prior to the Air Force exchange transfer over to the Air Force? How was that learning curve? And obviously you had done a bunch of SAR, but obviously not combat search and rescue. How did that kind of translate?
Well, the one that was no big change, flying and everything, and but one of the good point. What we did when we got there, the Air Force was not familiar with water rescue. Okay, and the H-3, they had just gotten the H-3, which was an amphibious, and a lot of the pilots then were trying to make it to the South China Sea and bail out rather than over the jungle, of course. And the Air Force they had problems going in and almost drowning people, the downwash and so forth. So when we got there, we established a training program for all the aircraft commanders, having all been H-52 pilots, and we established a training program where how to do water rescues, land slowly, air taxi up to them, or if you had to lower the basket, let it drag behind, but never get over them with the downwash. And that was very instrumental in the training there with the Air Force, and it was very needed. So that was a good aspect of it, yes.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. So What about your time back here? Did you like being at ATC?
Oh yeah, it was good. Matter of fact, we got to man, one of the big jobs I enjoyed, I'd go up to Sikorsky and test fly the H3s and bring them back to Mobile, and then ferry them to various places up to Alaska or to Puerto Rico, and spent a lot of time on the road going on-site training. We'd go maybe take 5 instructors, and we'd go on site with 3 helicopters, and we'd transition all the helicopters. We'd stay there maybe a month, going and transition all the pilots to the H3, and we'd stay there that period of time. And we went to all the H3 units over a period of time of doing that. And then in addition, once we did that, we'd go back once a year for a stand ride, each and every pilot, a day flight and a night flight with each one of them. And let's see, we only had, I think, 6 or 7 H3 instructor pilots, plus we were conducting ground school here at the same time. So it was a busy time, but it was fun, you know, getting to travel a lot and fly a lot. So that was good.
You know, I think your first commanding officer, was it Jim Durfee?
No.
Was he right before you?
What was his name? High.
Okay.
Captain High.
Okay, so you had ATC number 2. Jim Durfee was ATC number 1. And
okay.
He'll actually be with us in a month or two here to celebrate his 100th birthday.
Great.
He's our oldest Coast Guard aviator, so we'll be having a conversation with him.
Great.
In November. So we'll make sure we tell him that you said
Great. That's super.
Well, that's great. Well, hey, as we wrap up here, I just wanted to ask you an open-ended question. You know, you have been there and done it. You've achieved things that many of us could only dream of doing. What advice would you have for someone who's considering Coast Guard aviation, or for our young and now mid-career aviators in the audience?
Well, I think there's no greatest feeling of satisfaction when you go out and you successfully complete a mission, and you can actually save someone's life. It's a great feeling. And I think one thing you have to be careful. Of course, you don't fly as much as we used to, but you have to worry about complacency. It's easy to get complacent now. I would think with all of the added bells and whistles that you have. But that's one thing that I think we used to have to fight against even then. So I think that's probably something that everyone needs to work against.
Wow.
With that.
Amen. Well, Lonnie, I can't thank you enough for being here. You are living proof of why we train aggressively.
Well, I tell you what, you guys, you're doing such a great job. I'm proud to be a Jolly Green, but I'm more proud to be a Coast Guard rescue pilot.
Amen. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in from wherever you are, and for our pilots in the audience here today. Thank you. But most of all, Lonnie, thank you for everything that you've done for our nation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.